Some backpacks weigh more at 70 than they did at 30, not because they're bigger, but because they're filled with things you no longer need, yet you still carry them as if you didn't have the right to let them go. Other people's expectations, inherited guilt, old fears, all those things that once made sense, but now only delay your peace. The truth is, many of the ideas you were taught to hold on to with pride are now keeping you from living freely. And clinging to them isn't loyalty, it's self-abandonment. But it's not too late to let go. Because living in peace isn't a luxury for the naive. It's a quiet triumph for those brave enough to stop carrying the weight. Today, we're going to go through 9 things you no longer need in order to live in peace after 60. And I'll warn you now, the last one might radically change the way you understand guilt, silence, and your right to put yourself first. I'm Gabriel, and if you're here, it's because a part of you is already ready to let go. Stay with me until the end. This could be the beginning of a lighter life. How long are you going to keep waiting for someone to tell you that you did things right? Think about it. How many times have you silenced your feelings or postponed your own desires just out of fear of being judged? At this point in life, continuing to seek external validation isn't prudence or humility. It's emotional slavery disguised as good intentions. This is today's first point. Stop waiting for external validation, because what you didn't receive when you deserved it won't come just because you keep begging for it. It doesn't matter how many sacrifices you've made, how many times you swallowed your tears to keep the peace, or how often you pretended to be fine just to avoid making others uncomfortable. If they haven't seen you, heard you, or thanked you by now, it won't be your silence that finally wakes them up. And as long as you live waiting for a pat on the back or a recognition that never comes, you'll be handing your power over to those who never knew how to care for it. A woman wrote to me a few months ago. She said, "Gabriel, I raised my kids on my own, worked all my life, I've been there for everyone. And now that I'm finally free, I don't know who I am without them. I feel like if no one needs me or tells me I matter, I cease to exist." Her voice wasn't broken from weakness, but from exhaustion. From years of holding up a world that never held her back. I replied with a story I want to share with you now. Imagine an oil lamp in an ancient temple. Its light has guided everyone who came in. Travelers, beggars, priests, for decades. No one ever asked if it needed more oil, if it was too hot, or if it felt lonely in the dark. They just expected it to keep shining. But one day, the oil runs out, the flame flickers, and just as darkness begins to fill the temple, everyone panics. Only then do they ask what's wrong. But it's too late. The lamp should never have been allowed to burn out without anyone noticing. That might be how you've lived, always being that steady light for everyone, hoping someone would realize the price you've paid to be useful, present, flawless. But your life can't keep revolving around what others see or ignore. Marcus Aurelius said it plainly, "The praise of men is mere smoke, and their opinions are nothing but a breath of air." He didn't say it out of bitterness, but from clarity. Understanding this doesn't make you cold. It makes you someone who's finally looking where you always should have, within. Take a moment to think about this. How many important decisions did you make just to be accepted? How many silences did you carry so you wouldn't stand out? How many times did you deny your own voice out of fear that it wasn't what others wanted to hear? That little girl you once were deserved to be seen. That mother who gave everything without asking for anything in return deserved to be appreciated. But if no one ever did, that doesn't define your worth. It only reveals the blindness of those who couldn't see you. At 60, at 70, you don't need the world to hand you a diploma for your effort. You need to look in the mirror and say without hesitation, "I've lived, I've endured, and from now on, I don't live to please anyone else." That is the only validation that matters. The kind that comes from within. The kind that doesn't need applause or permission. Because when you stop waiting for approval, true peace begins. And that peace doesn't depend on anyone. It's yours. Yours alone. You already know that waiting for validation is a silent way of living disconnected from yourself. But it's not the only emotional trap that can steal your peace. There's another one, just as corrosive, that hides behind kindness and is often mistaken for politeness or love. We've reached the second key point of this video, and it's this: break free from the need to please. For decades, many women have believed that being pleasing is a virtue. Smile. Don't make trouble. Be helpful. Don't be a burden. Be the first to rise and the last to sit. Sound familiar? The problem is that this repeated message has built an identity rooted in emotional submission. And when that identity settles in, choosing not to please others feels like betrayal. But it's not. It's actually the first act of freedom. Epictetus said that those who constantly seek approval are slaves to others. And he was right. Because when your worth depends on whether others are happy with you, you're no longer the owner of your life. Every decision becomes a minefield. What will my son think if I say no? What will my friends say if I don't go with her? What will others feel if I don't live up to their expectations? Living like that is exhausting. It's like walking with a mirror on your back, trying to see your reflection through someone else's eyes. The saddest part is that in many cases, this need to please comes from old wounds, maybe from a childhood where affection had to be earned, or from a relationship where you were only valued when you completely erased yourself, or from a job where recognition came at the cost of personal sacrifice. Over the years, those dynamics become so natural that you don't even realize you're repeating them everywhere, at home, with your children, with your friends, even with yourself. But pleasing others doesn't always mean loving them. Sometimes it means betraying yourself. It means silencing your needs. It means saying yes when inside you're screaming no. And when that happens, day after day, what you lose isn't just time or energy. You lose your voice, your center, your clarity. The desire to please becomes an emotional addiction. Every fake smile, every unwanted favor, every space you give up out of habit adds one more drop to the cup of your resentment. Until one day that cup overflows and you find yourself feeling alone, empty, used, without really understanding how you got there. This problem deeply affects your mental health, not just because it fills you with anxiety or frustration, but because it disconnects you from yourself. Your body starts to speak, your back aches, you can't sleep, your stomach tightens. These are signs. The soul has its own symptoms, and one of the most common is that invisible exhaustion that appears after too much time spent pleasing everyone but yourself. And when it comes to family relationships, things get even more complicated. Constantly trying to please creates a silent imbalance. Others get used to you always being available. They don't ask if you can, if you want to, if you need anything. They just expect you to show up. And when one day you finally set boundaries, they react as if you're the one who changed. But in reality, all you did was remember that you're a person, not just a role. Now, this doesn't mean becoming indifferent or selfish. Stoicism doesn't teach us to reject others, but to organize our lives around what we can control. And what you can control, without a doubt, is your decision to live authentically, not to be liked. After a certain age, being liked can't be a priority. Your priority must be peace, and peace doesn't come from making everyone else happy. It comes from no longer betraying yourself. Imagine for a moment that your life is a garden. What's the point of planting flowers you don't even like, just because others want to see them? What's the point of watering what doesn't bloom in you, just because someone else asks you to? At this stage, your garden should reflect your essence, not the decoration others expect. Choosing not to please everyone is a spiritual act. It's honoring the voice God gave you, the one you silence for years to keep the peace. And now, more than ever, that voice needs to be heard, not by others, by you, because your life no longer needs applause, it needs truth. And truth is never born from being agreeable, but from self-respect. You weren't born to live for others, you were born to live in truth. And truth often reveals itself in those seemingly empty moments when you can finally hear yourself without outside noise. That's where true companionship begins. That's where you find yourself. Let me be clear. If you don't learn how to be alone, you'll never truly be free, because you'll keep searching in others for the companionship only you can give yourself. And that dependence, no matter how well hidden, is what keeps you trapped. But if you choose to face that fear and discover that silence can also be a home, you'll begin to experience a kind of peace that no one can take away from you. And without inner connection, there is no real peace. You can have a full calendar, active chats, a home filled with guests, and still feel empty inside, because the presence of others doesn't always heal the absence of you. That's why the true challenge isn't avoiding solitude, it's learning to inhabit it peacefully. And that doesn't happen overnight. It comes from the daily practice of being with yourself without running away, listening without judgment, allowing yourself to feel without needing to explain. When you fear being alone, you start accepting things you don't need. Phone calls filled with complaints, visits that leave you drained, conversations that revolve around everyone else's problems. You put up with it because you think something is better than nothing. But that something often costs you more than it gives. And slowly, without realizing it, your energy begins to fade. Not from lack of activity, but from emotional exhaustion. That's the most serious consequence of this trap. It disconnects you from yourself, from your desires, from your deepest spirituality. The fear of being alone is a mental trap fed by old wounds and cultural expectations. And like all effective traps, it comes disguised as concern. Don't isolate yourself. You need someone. Find company. But no one tells you that you can also find company in yourself, in your peace, in your chosen silence. Marcus Aurelius wrote that true freedom lies in the ability to retreat into oneself, not as punishment, but as an act of inner return. Because there's a big difference between imposed solitude and chosen solitude. One depletes you, the other transforms you. This fear isn't new. It's been settling in your mind like a shadow that follows you everywhere. From a young age, you were taught that being with someone meant success, worth, purpose. That a woman alone is a woman lacking something. That if no one is waiting for you, calling you, asking how you are, then your life isn't meaningful enough. That idea, repeated for decades, has led many women to stay trapped in empty relationships, soul-crushing routines, and social circles that drain them, just to avoid facing the silence they fear so much. But that silence isn't the enemy. The real enemy is having forgotten how to be at home within yourself. When you begin to set boundaries around family expectations and recognize that your life can no longer revolve around the demands of others, something inside you realigns. You reclaim space, time, and dignity. But then another fear appears, quieter, more intimate, harder to name: loneliness. And that brings us to the fourth point in this video, a truth that's uncomfortable but deeply liberating when embraced with courage. Let go of the fear of being alone. There comes a time in life when you have to take an honest look at what you've been holding on to. Not just objects, but ideas, commitments, resentments, routines, relationships, tasks that no longer make sense. And yet, you keep carrying them out of fear, out of habit, or out of the mistaken belief that letting go would mean losing something essential. But that's not true. The fifth point in this video touches something deep. Let go of the need to accumulate. Because continuing to add things you no longer need is a quiet way of staying tied to a past that no longer supports you. Accumulation isn't always obvious. It's not just overflowing drawers or packed closets. It's that feeling that everything depends on you, that if you let go of something, a responsibility, a person, a fixed idea, everything will fall apart. But the truth is, what often collapses when you let go is exactly what was keeping you from growing. This need to accumulate comes from a scarcity mindset, one shaped by years of survival, uncertainty, and abandonment. You were taught that having is protecting, that keeping everything is wisdom. But no one told you that over time, what you keep also starts to weigh you down. And what once felt like protection slowly turns into a prison. Continuing to live this way takes a toll on your body, your mind, and your spirit. You carry more than you need, and that wears you down. Your home fills with things you don't use. Your days fill with obligations you don't enjoy. Your thoughts revolve around what's missing, what you might lose, what you must hold on to. Life becomes a constant inventory, a struggle to maintain. And in that effort, you lose lightness, clarity, peace. You lose the ability to breathe deeply and say, "This no longer serves me, and I can let it go without fear." But yes, it is possible to change this pattern, not with an impulsive act, but with a clear decision. The key is in shifting your perspective from a mindset of scarcity to one of sufficiency. To understand that having less is not losing, it's simplifying. That letting go is not giving up, it's making space for what's next. And that living with less is a profound act of self-respect because you stop defining your life by what you own and start building it around what truly matters to you. Seneca said that true wealth lies not in having much, but in needing little. And at this stage of life, that becomes a vital principle. Because you need fewer things, but more meaning. Less accumulation, but more direction. Less noise, but more presence. To achieve that, you have to ask yourself a key question. What am I still holding on to out of fear, and what am I willing to release to live more lightly? The answer won't come all at once, but if you're brave enough to listen with honesty, it could be the start of a transformation you no longer need to delay. You're not here to hold on to what's unnecessary, you're here to honor what's essential. And what's essential often doesn't weigh you down. It lightens you, frees you, helps you breathe again. Don't be afraid to let go. You have the right to live with less burden, with more peace, with more truth. Even if you were taught that accumulating means security, today you can choose the opposite. Choose the kind of emptiness that makes room to begin again. Because yes, you can still begin. When you start letting go of what you no longer need, leaving behind what you've held onto out of habit or fear, something inside you begins to breathe differently. But that breath doesn't last long if you're still trapped in one idea that has quietly damaged the lives of many older people, the belief that it's already too late. That thought, which may sound harmless, is actually an invisible chain that blocks any chance of a new beginning. And that's why we've reached the sixth point in this video, one of the most decisive. Let go of the belief that it's too late. Pause for a moment and picture this clearly. Imagine waking up 20 years from now, at 80 or 90, with your mind still sharp, but your body a bit more fragile, and you realize you spent the last 20 years waiting for the perfect moment to make that change you always dreamed of, to learn something new, to move into a space that truly feels like yours, to finally tell someone you're done carrying their guilt, to start fresh in a small workshop, a class, an idea you never dared to explore. But you didn't do it. Not because you couldn't. You didn't do it because you believed it was too late. And now, from that bed or that armchair looking out the window, you realize that time didn't run out all at once. It was wasted in tiny daily surrenders. That's the truth many don't want to face. It's not time that denies us life. It's us when we stop using it with intention. It's too late doesn't come with the clock. It comes with resignation, with the false idea that if something wasn't done by 40, it no longer matters. But who decided that? Who has the authority to tell you when you lost the right to begin something new? Because as long as you're alive, as long as you can hear these words, you can still change the course of your days. This limiting belief creeps in slowly. It comes dressed as caution, as realism, in phrases like, "That's not for me anymore. At my age, it makes no sense. I'm not up for that kind of thing anymore." But what you're really saying is, "I'm afraid of failing again. I'm tired of wanting and never getting there. I'd rather not try than risk feeling ridiculous or frustrated again." And that way of protecting yourself becomes the same wall that traps you. Because when you believe it's too late, you stop searching. You stop imagining. You stop moving. You become a functional shadow, alive on the outside, but frozen on the inside. And what happens when that idea rules your days? You get a soulless routine, a calendar filled with empty obligations, a body that stiffens because it no longer moves with purpose. Conversations that circle around the past, not out of nostalgia, but because the future feels off limits. And worst of all, the relationship with yourself grows distant, as if you no longer had the right to want anything more, as if aging were only about waiting, not choosing. But let me tell you something that may not sound gentle, but is absolutely necessary. There won't be a magical day when you suddenly feel ready. That day doesn't exist. What does exist is this moment, this day, this hour, where you can decide that you've postponed your life long enough. It doesn't matter if you're 60, 70, or beyond. What matters is that you're breathing today. Today, you can say no. Today, you can walk differently. Today, you can learn, release, begin. And it doesn't require big gestures. Sometimes one single decision is enough to start undoing a lifetime of silence. Don't believe that, because it took you a while. It no longer counts. Maturity isn't an ending. It's a rich space to build with new awareness. Don't live as if everything's already been written, because it hasn't. There are still pages waiting to be filled, and you are the only one who can write them. Here, now, with who you are, with what you have. No apologies, no permission, no waiting. If in the previous point, we dismantled the big lie that it's too late, now it's time to go even deeper. Because realizing that you can still begin is one thing, but having the courage to make that beginning your own, authentic, and unconditioned by what others expect from you is something else entirely. That's why the 7th point in this video is just as necessary as it is uncomfortable. Forget the image of the perfect grandmother, because that idealized figure they sold you, the sweet woman, always available, smiling, quiet, patient, isn't just unrealistic, it's dangerous. Behind that mask of virtue, there's often a life of unrecognized sacrifice, unchosen silence, frustrations no one sees, because supposedly you've already fulfilled your role. But you weren't born to play a role. You were born to live. And if you've reached this stage, still acting out the script others wrote for you, it's not too late to tear it up. It doesn't matter how many times you've been applauded for giving everything. If giving everything left you empty, that model isn't worth keeping. What others expect of you can't keep weighing more than what you expect of yourself, and this isn't the time for denial or self-deception. If you keep acting like the helpful woman everyone celebrates, but inside, you're exhausted, bitter, or disconnected, then the problem isn't just your environment. It's also you for choosing to keep playing a part that no longer represents who you are. This is the point where many resist. Because questioning the image of the perfect grandmother also means questioning what you think gives you worth. And that's not easy, Maybe you believe that if you stop caring, stop helping, stop being constantly available, you won't know who you are anymore. But that confusion is exactly the symptom of an identity built around the needs of others, not around your desires, not around your essence. It's a life shaped from the outside in. And living that way isn't love, it's emotional dependence dressed up as virtue. Seneca put it harshly. He who lives to please others is already dead. And he wasn't talking about physical death. He meant that slow, everyday death that happens when you stop being yourself to become what others need. But today, right now, you can choose something else. You can stop asking for permission to be real. You can raise your voice, set boundaries, let go of the duty to always be available. And yes, some people might pull away, criticize you, get offended. But that will only prove that what tied them to you wasn't love. It was convenience. And if they walk away because of your truth, let them go. Because your peace is not for sale. Your dignity is not up for negotiation. There is no true transformation without responsibility, and part of that responsibility is acknowledging that you too have kept certain dynamics going, out of fear of losing love, recognition, or companionship. But now you know that the price of continuing to pretend is far too high. So break the image, free yourself from the character, and start living as the woman you truly are, not as the one others expect to see, because you still can, because you deserve to, because no one else is going to do it for you. After breaking free from the image of the perfect grandmother, with everything that role implies, docility, unconditional giving, the denial of personal desire, what comes next runs even deeper. Because once you stop performing for others, the greater challenge remains, reclaiming your voice. And that brings us to the 8th point in this video: abandon the forced silence. Because staying quiet isn't always wisdom. Sometimes it's survival. Sometimes it's the echo of years when speaking up was dangerous, inconvenient, or unwelcome. But now, continuing to stay silent is surrendering without a fight. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You've swallowed words for decades. You've hidden truths to keep the peace. You've avoided conflict, even when silence was eating you alive. And maybe back then, that was all you could do. But today, staying in that place is no longer caution. It's self-abandonment. Abandonment of your clarity, of your dignity. And you don't need some grand gesture to start breaking out of that silence. You just need one concrete step. Say what you feel when you feel it, without justifying it, without dressing it up, without apologizing for having a voice of your own. Try it. The next time someone crosses a boundary, don't respond with avoidance or that fake smile you're so tired of. Say what you really think, not with anger, but with firmness, from a place of self-respect. And when you do, pay attention to how you feel, maybe fear, maybe discomfort. But if you're honest, you'll feel something else too. Strength. That strength that comes from knowing you're alive, present, and in charge of what comes out of your own mouth. But speaking once isn't enough. Transformation happens when you choose to stand by your words. When you decide you won't keep silencing yourself out of habit, fear, or guilt. And that can only happen with a clear mindset, understanding that your truth doesn't need to be accepted to have value. You're not here to convince anyone. You're here to live in alignment with yourself. Stoicism reminds us that what isn't within your control shouldn't govern you. And the opinions of others, their discomfort, their judgment, none of that is up to you. But what is up to you is whether you continue to stay quiet or finally decide to speak from who you are. The responsibility, as always, is yours. No one is coming to give you permission. No one will tell you when the right time is. The right time is now. Because as long as you live in silence, others will write your story. Others will put words in your mouth. Others will decide what you can feel, what you can think, what you can want. And at this stage in your life, that is no longer acceptable. So speak, with a steady voice, with awareness, with the certainty that your words matter, because they do. And because now, more than ever, it's time to use them. After reclaiming your voice, after speaking with clarity, with firmness, with conviction, comes one of the hardest moments on the path, standing by what you said. Because every real change shakes the foundation. And when you choose to live with more truth, more boundaries, more presence, the masks begin to fall, including your own. This is the point where many people, especially later in life, feel the temptation to step back, to soften, to justify the very changes they began to make. That's why the 9th point in this journey may be the most crucial: release inherited guilt. Because as long as you keep carrying guilt that isn't yours, you'll keep justifying choices that hurt you. You'll stay stuck in draining relationships. You'll keep holding back your life to repay emotional debts that were never yours to begin with. Guilt is a master of disguise. Sometimes it shows up as compassion. I can't say no, he needs me. Or as responsibility, if I don't do it, who will? Or as spiritual fear, what if I'm being selfish? But what's behind these thoughts isn't virtue, it's deep conditioning, a form of emotional control you learned as a child. Maybe you were raised with the belief that love means sacrifice, that being a good mother means being constantly available, that a respectable woman is one who never puts her desires first. And now, at 60 or 70, you're still acting from that script, even if you no longer believe in it. That's inherited guilt, a system of thought you didn't create, but that governs you like it's law. The most damaging thing about this guilt is how it paralyzes you. Every time you're about to make an important decision, an inner voice stops you, tells you you're betraying someone, that you're being harsh, that you don't have the right. And that voice, though it sounds like yours, was planted by others, by a culture that glorifies endless self-sacrifice, by family members who taught you to stay quiet to keep the peace, by relationships that only valued you when you erased yourself. Living like that is an illusion. It looks like you're being kind, but really you're becoming invisible. It looks like you're nurturing, but really you're letting yourself be drained. It looks like peace, but really it's just pause. Stoicism makes it clear. You are only responsible for what you choose consciously, not for what others expect of you, not for mistakes you didn't make, not for stories that were never yours to write. Releasing inherited guilt doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean rejecting anyone. It simply means recognizing that you can't keep living to compensate for the lacks or expectations of others, and that you deserve, finally, to live from your center, not from emotional debts that have weighed you down for decades. Maybe you think it's too late for that you're already set in your ways, that change isn't worth it anymore. But if guilt is still making your choices, then you're not living, you're obeying. And living in obedience to an invisible mandate is a slow way to disappear. So ask yourself this, without filters or excuses: whose voice is stopping you from making the decision you know you need to make? If it isn't yours, you don't owe it obedience. If it doesn't come from your truth, it doesn't deserve more sacrifice. And if that guilt doesn't let you feel at peace, then it has no spiritual value. This is the moment to let it go. With respect, yes, but with firmness. Because there's no more time to waste carrying burdens that keep you from moving forward. Because your life deserves a different story. And that story can't be written if the ink is still guilt. Getting to this point is no small thing. This video wasn't comfortable, it wasn't easy, and it wasn't made to entertain you or sugarcoat the truth. It was a mirror, one that not many people dare to look into. If you stayed until the end, it wasn't out of curiosity. It was because somewhere deep inside, a strength is waking up. A part of you that no longer wants to pretend everything is fine, that no longer wants to justify the exhaustion or hide the longing for change. And that deserves respect. Because not everyone gets here. Not everyone has the courage to face these truths without softening them, without denying them, without running. But you did. Today we talked about 9 things you no longer need in order to live in peace. And while each one might seem hard to let go of, the truth is that carrying them is even harder. Living with the weight of what no longer represents you, no longer belongs to you, no longer builds you up. That's what drains your strength day after day. That's why this isn't about inspiration or naive optimism. It's about decision. Because living in peace isn't a reward you get, it's a stance you choose. And if you decide to stay where you are, with the same excuses, the same fears, the same guilt, you're also choosing the consequences. But if you decide to let go, with all the vertigo that comes with it, you're opening the door to a lighter life, a more honest life, a life that's truly yours. I'm Gabriel, and this channel exists for one reason: to walk alongside those who've been invisible for far too long. Women who are lucid, deep, spiritually awake, who are no longer interested in soft talk or lukewarm support. Women who aren't looking for comfort, but for direction. Because El Jardín Estoico isn't a refugee for hiding from pain. It's a space for facing it head-on, with your head held high, your voice steady, and your awareness wide awake. If these ideas truly spoke to you, subscribe. Be part of this community of women who've chosen to wake up. Share this video with someone you know needs it. Someone who's still staying quiet, still postponing, still holding on to the unbearable. And if this content was a mirror for you, make it known in the comments. Write the phrase, "My peace is not for sale," and tell me which country you're watching from. That way, I'll know you are here, not just listening, but choosing to act. This isn't the end of the conversation, it's just the beginning. Stay and watch one of the videos that will appear on screen. Each one can help you keep letting go of what no longer serves you and keep building the life that's still possible. Because yes, it still is.